ومن يضلله فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. All praises belong to Allah. We praise Him and we ask Him for forgiveness and for guidance. We seek protection in Allah from the malice of our own souls and from the evil of our own actions. Whoever Allah guides, no one can lead astray, and whoever He leads astray, no one can lead him or her back to the straight path. I bear witness that there is no other God except Allah, by Himself, no associates with Him, and I bear witness that Muhammad is His slave and His messenger. O you who have believed, be mindful of Allah and do not die except as a Muslim. O you have believed, be mindful of Allah and always say a word directed towards the truth, so that He can make your conduct whole and sound and forgive you for your sins. And whoever obeys Allah and His messenger has attained the highest achievement. Have you noticed anything with recent conversations, either between you and others or between other people, about current events, whether it's Black Lives Matter, police brutality, or about whether we should or should not be wearing masks during the pandemic? These conversations are sometimes heated and confrontational. What an idiot, I might say about the other. Sometimes judgment about the goodness of the other is made depending upon where they stand on these issues. And so then judgment is made and each person doubles down and digs in their heels on their position. And everyone leaves and feels good about themselves, and because the other person is obviously crazy, and nothing changes. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was a master of human psychology. He was very good at pointing out the ills that he didn't like without pointing fingers at a specific person. His technique was to phrase his concern in the form of a question, as in, why is it that I see people do such and such, unquote. Or to be more specific, he asked once, quote, why do people love their money, more than they love the cause of God, unquote. And then his companions would think to themselves, was that me he's referring to? And they would wonder if it was something specific he was talking about. It led to a type of introspection and thought about themselves without feeling blamed or humiliated, and thus not defensive or embarrassed. This was his technique to encourage change. Furthermore, he wasn't into the details of other people's personal affairs, and he simply wasn't into blaming others. The Prophet ﷺ, furthermore, lived in a self-imposed state of poverty. His home was simple, a few palm leaves for his bed, 3 cushions or so for seating, and so on. From whatever he had, he would give and give and give, and encouraged his wives to do so. If or when they didn't give, he didn't chastise them or argue with them or push them. Rather, he would become sad. Notice the lack of blame and finger pointing. He encouraged, yet stood back when not listened to. It's something for us to think about in our daily lives. So what's the relevance to today? We live in a time where we're pointing fingers about issues of race, BLM, the BLM movement, police funding, and more. The blame game closes the door to understanding and to real change. A person or a group being accused gets defensive and nothing changes. But if we approach these topics in a similar manner using the Prophet's example, then perhaps these conversations would lead to something more substantial. In a way, it's abandoning the assignment of blame. As Douglas Stone in the Wright in their business book, Difficult Conversations, which I highly recommend, quote, focusing on blame is a bad idea because it inhibits our ability to learn what's really causing the problem and to do anything meaningful to correct it, unquote. And what's the purpose of all these conversations, BLM, police, safety measures? The purpose is to create space for thought and reflection and understanding. Blame tends to look back and immediately condemns the person at the end of your pointed finger. The Prophet's technique, on the other hand, doesn't assign blame, doesn't put the other party on the defensive. Rather, it leaves things open for contemplation, to think about what happened, and more importantly, to think about what exactly is being highlighted here and what to do. It encourages this thought, and that's what we need at this time in order for there to be real change. From where I am, the only change I can affect is at the one-on-one level, conversations with people around me. Now, most of the time, I have these conversations with people who think similar to the way I do, so for me, it's easy. Some of you, on the other hand, are having these conversations with people who don't get your point of view. Think about your approach when discussing these matters, or when you're confronted with someone else's opinion that wildly diverges from yours. Instead of thinking or saying, how could she even say that? Or let's be a little more concrete. Why are we always hearing this term black on black crime, but we never really hear this term white on white crime? Just think about that for a few seconds. What's going on there? Consider the power of our choice of words. Perhaps that will soften our approach when you're replying or having these conversations with people who differ from yourself. Perhaps the compassion that opens up can leave the door open to understanding instead of blaming. And perhaps that will open the door for the person you're talking to not simply listen to you, but to truly hear you. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. I say the saying of mine, and I seek forgiveness from Allah for me and for you, and to the rest of Muslims who ask Him for forgiveness. He's the forgiver, the merciful. Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. In the name of Allah, all praises and exaltations to Allah, and peace and blessings be upon the messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. In the second part, I'd like to move on to a different related topic, and that is speaking to authority. This is a central tenet in our faith. In Surah An-Nisa, ayah 135, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, يا أيها الذين آمنوا كونوا قوامين بالقسط شهداء لله ولو على أنفسكم أو الوالدين والأقربين إن يكن غنيا أو فقيرا فالله أولى بهما فلا تتبعوا الهوى أن تعدلوا وإن تلوا أو تعرضوا فإن الله كان بما تعملون خبيرا. O you who have believed, uphold justice and bear witness to God, even if it is against yourselves, your parents, your close relatives, whether the person is rich or poor. God can best take care of both. Refrain from following your own desire so that you can act justly. If you distort or neglect justice, God is fully aware of what you do. We are instructed to stand up for the truth no matter who it affects, ourselves, the wealthy, our family, the poor. He's a pretty good story. Do you know the story of the greatest or worst aviation disaster in history? It actually occurred in 1977 when two 747s collided on the ground in Tenerife. That evening, the grounds were full of planes because a lot of planes were diverted because there was some other issue going on at a nearby airport. The night itself was foggy, and planes were landing and taking off, and the airport was packed. That evening, a full KLM airliner was taking off in the fog, and at around 160 miles an hour, it struck a full Pan Am airliner that was taxiing on the runway. Both planes were destroyed, and the resulting fires took hours to put out. As part of the investigation into what happened, one of the speculated causes was that the first officer and the flight engineer of that KLM plane did not speak up and challenge the captain when he began the takeoff without clearance from the tower. That captain was the most senior pilot at KLM and highly respected. The first officer and the flight engineer were clearly intimidated. And you know what happened? 583 people died as a result. So during the prophetic journey, the prophet himself had to speak up to authority figures in his community and in his family. But think about the bigger picture in Mecca. The situation then, it was controlled and led by men who had a certain way of life. Back then, in that place, tribal affiliation was the most important thing a person had. Many of these leaders were from the Prophet's tribe, the Quraysh, and he grew up around them. They were wealthy and controlled the city. No doubt an intimidating situation. Not only that, to push back against them was to speak to power. It could lead to being excommunicated or pushed out from your clan. And that way of life, that was essentially a death sentence. That's nothing like what we're used to here. We can be free to move and go around and be just fine, most of us. And so it wasn't until 3 years into his prophethood when the Prophet ﷺ called the leaders of Mecca to Islam. One night, he invited the male elders of his family of the city to a dinner of milk and mutton. And after they finished, the Prophet stood up to speak and recited the Quran, inviting them to the new faith. Pretty quickly, his uncle Lahab got up immediately, made a big ruckus, and had everyone disperse. Now, that was the insult of insults, to do something like that where you offend your host after he just fed you. Yet the next day, the Prophet invited them again to the same meal with this risk again of being essentially kicked out of Mecca. It takes a lot of courage to do something like that. These were powerful and wealthy men who controlled Mecca. And I think that would be pretty intimidating for me to have all my elders come and then challenge their beliefs and speak directly to them and challenge them. The Prophet continued his public invitation to Islam and was challenging the established order at the same time. This kept going on and on until the leaders of the Quraysh couldn't take it anymore. They went to the Prophet's protector at the time, Abu Talib, and with a threat. As told in Karen Armstrong's Muhammad, a biography of the Prophet, quote, they said, by God, we cannot endure that our fathers should be reviled, our customs mocked, and our gods insulted. Until you rid us of him, we will fight the pair of you until one side perishes, unquote. The Quraysh felt that they were fighting for their whole way of life, which was being daily undermined. They had already realized that there was no possibility of compromise, and only one side could win. Abu Talib was dismayed. He called Muhammad to him. He told him, spare me and yourself, he begged. Do not put on me a burden greater than I can bear. Thinking that Abu Talib was about to give him up, Muhammad replied with tears in his eyes that he was ready to die. Quote, on my uncle, by God, if they put the sun in my right hand and the moon in my left, on condition that I abandon this course until God has made it victorious or I perish therein, I would not abandon it. He then broke down and left the room weeping bitterly. But at once Abu Talib called him back. Go and say what you please, for by God I will never give you up on any account. For the time being, Muhammad was safe. As long as Abu Talib was his protector and could make this protection effective, nobody in Mecca would be able to touch him, unquote. So just keep in mind, when the Prophet ﷺ rejected his uncle's offer, he was prepared to be cut off from his clan and cast out. It would have been open season on his life. Having no protection in the 7th century in Arabia at that time is essentially a death sentence. He was ready to go. The point of the story is that we need to think about standing up for our values and our principles, no matter what the potential loss or perceived loss could be. In the Prophet's case, ﷺ, he was ready to not only lose everything that he had, he was ready to give up all the impossible riches that they could offer him. He was ready to lose everything. How many of us believe that strongly in our principles, in our values, in everything that we talk about and argue for? It's important that we, myself included, spend time reflecting on our values and our principles and think about what we would do if we were faced with a loss of everything that we held dear: family, health, money, possessions. What would I do if I was faced with this challenge and I had to speak up to power? عباد الله إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون اذكروا الله العظيم يذكركم واشكروه يزدكم واستغفروه يغفر لكم واتقوه يجعل لكم من أمركم مخرجا. O servants of Allah, Allah commands justice and the doing of good and the liberality to kith and kin. He forbids all shameful deeds and injustice and rebellion. He instructs you so that you can remember. Be mindful of Allah, who is the supreme in glory, and He will remember you. And be thankful to Allah, and He will increase you in your bounty. And seek forgiveness from Allah, and He will forgive you. And be mindful, have taqwa at all times, and He'll make a way out for you for whatever situation you're in. So that concludes this Friday's khutbah, a reminder. Please stick around at the end if you'd like to hang out online on Zoom. But a few announcements first. So this Sunday from 1 to 2:30, we're continuing with the Sunday Sira Youth Program. I think this is week 46,000. And this is about, based on the book, Revelation by Miraj Muhyiddin. It's an excellent program. It's about an hour and a half. You can always sign up for that, register online for that. And then really exciting, next Friday night, July 3rd, is the first of a discussion here on Zoom based on Islam in Black America. So Islam in Black America is a course put on by Dr. Sherman Jackson at USC. He's adjunct faculty at Bayan Claremont, which is basically a accredited graduate school of Islamic theology. It's a course that's online. It's already recorded. It's been out there for a little bit. Strongly recommend you register for the course. It's free. You have to register by Tuesday. So go to Bayan Claremont, edu. You can find, just Google it, and register for the class. Start watching. And every week, we're going to be meeting Friday evening to discuss the topics that he brings up. It's a survey between the encounter between Islam and the Black community in America, from slavery all the way to current times to hip hop. A really good course. I highly recommend it, and please join. And even if you don't have time to watch the class, please join in the conversation. It's always interesting, and we all learn from everyone. And then a new class coming up, starting on Monday, July 6th. There'll be a Quran memorization youth class. This is going to be, again, by Zoom. The instructor is Narisha Jalal. These are for ages 7 to 10. There'll be a small group of students from group 3 to 5 students. They'll meet daily, Monday through Friday, with Narisha Jalal. And the goal is to memorize 1 surah a week. The class is free, but spots are limited. So please email info@muslimspace.org by this Wednesday. Indicate your child's name, age, and whatever Quran proficiency they have. So this will be pretty cool. It's from July 6th to August 28th. So hopefully we're done before school starts. And that's pretty much it. So I hope all of you are staying safe. Wear your masks. Things are getting pretty heavy duty out there, as you know, with here in Texas, at least for those of you that are in Texas. And that's it. So assalamu alaikum, but stick around.